Okay, hi guys. I'm sorry I can't see all of you easily, but I'm really happy to share this with you. One of my favorite things is board fundraising. I will tell you that 100% of the boards I've trained in this method are more comfortable fundraising and 100% are more willing. So I hope it's effective for your groups as well. I'm going to break this talk into 4 sections. First of all, I want to talk about why we hate fundraising. And by we, I mean us as well as the board. The 5 steps of asking, you're asking personality and preparing for yes. So let's dive right in. Why we hate fundraising. So it doesn't make sense at all why so many people hate fundraising, even some of the people who are fundraisers. So as we know from Giving USA, and probably a lot of you are familiar with this, despite every recession, every depression, donations keep coming back. Americans are very generous people. And also it makes people happy. There's something called a helper's high. So if you help someone, you get all these cool things. If it's a sincere act of philanthropy or a sincere, no arm twisting helping, you get a lot of the same drugs that happen when you have an orgasm. So it makes people feel good to be helpful. It also, people who volunteer and who are repeated philanthropists who give as part of their life, who tithe or whatever, tend to be healthier and live longer. It's also something that's hardwired, but it can go down if it becomes transactional. So there was a study done years ago with toddlers in a room with a researcher, and she, they gave the toddler a brand new toy that the toddler had not played with before. Some of you may know this study, so forgive me. But so the researchers like working away on her paper and pencil, and she dropped something intentionally, like a pencil or whatever, and it's clearly acting distressed. So the toddler usually gets up, comes over, picks up the pencil and gives it to her. Pure act of generosity, helpfulness, no incentive, and leaving a very attractive option, which is the toy. However, when they did the test over and over again with different children, if they rewarded them, so if they picked up the pencil and gave it to the researcher and the researcher gave them a lollipop, in future, they were less likely to come and help the researcher. So what that means is that as feral human beings, which is about what a 2-year-old is, in our native state, we want to be helpful. But if we make it transactional, it doesn't work quite so well. So let's talk about how to do non-transactional helping. I still want to know, why is it that board members don't love fundraising? So BoardSource did a survey and they found out, first of all, 65% of board chairs and executive directors gave their own boards a C, D, or F in fundraising. So that, and a lot of them gave themselves like an A in mission commitment and B+ in financial oversight and all that stuff. But these are A people that get on boards and they were not giving themselves a good grade. And more than half of them hate asking for money. Yet the #1 reason people give is because someone they know asked them and they wanted to help. So this is a real problem for our discipline. I want to take a minute, and any of you who don't want to be in the breakout room for this exercise, you've indicated as much. So this is what I'd like you to do. Take a minute and get a coin. You might have to go get your purse or whatever. I need you to have a coin with a heads and a tails. And I'm going to do the setup now. So while you're looking and listening, you're going to flip a coin. And after you flip it, you're going to cover it with your hand. And you're not going to look at what it says, what the response is. Okay. So the deal is, if it comes up heads right after this webinar, you have to go ask somebody immediately for $1,000 on the phone. If it comes up tails, you don't have to ask. Okay, so you're not going to look at it. You're going to flip the coin. Heads means you have to go ask. Tails means you don't. I'm going to assume everybody's pretty ready. If not, do it in your imagination. 1, 2, 3. Flip your coin. Cover it. Okay, so what I want to know before we go into the breakout room is, what were you thinking before you looked at it? So now you can look at the coin and heads or tails. So what the question is, what were you thinking when it was in the air? Were you saying, oh yeah, I can't wait I want it to be heads because I can't wait for it to be to go out and ask somebody? Or were you saying, oh God, I hope it's tails, because then I won't have to ask, okay? So what we're gonna do is we're gonna put you into breakout rooms. And what I would like you to do is you're just gonna chat about it with your group. Was it when the coin was in the air, were you hoping it would be yes or no? And if you're one of the ones who loved and was all hot to trot to ask, you don't have to share. But for those of you who are hoping not to ask, I'd like you to take a minute and share your reasons for why not. Like, what do you think would happen if you ask? How might it affect your relationship, or what is it going to say about you? So I'm going to give you guys just a few minutes to get into the group and discuss, any of you who are non-askers, the reluctant ones, to just share why. Why would you not want to ask? Like, you want to help your nonprofit, but why would you not ask? So Toby's going to put you into the rooms. Those of you who are in breakout rooms, those of you who chose not to be in breakout rooms, I'd like you to just sit down and journal for a minute. What was behind that reluctance? Okay, we ready to go?
And just a reminder, if you do want to join a breakout room, you can press the icon button and raise your hand, and we'll add you to a breakout room.
Let's take a minute, because I think some people are making decisions about that. Okay, I guess if it's just 8 people, then we'll put them in a room to discuss it, and the rest of you just take a minute to journal. So Toby, let's just give them like 3 minutes in the group to share any of the reluctant ones, and then we'll bring them back and we'll all look at it together. If we have any late arrivals who came in when we were doing, you can see the recording later. You'll see what the exercise was that came before it, and the results afterwards, and try it again yourself on your own.
Okay, everybody's back from the breakout room, it seems.
Sam, we can't hear you.
Of course, I had myself muted, didn't I?
Sorry.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Everybody seems to be back out from the breakout rooms.
Great. Okay, so I wanted to bring you back and take a minute to just ask you, Toby, can we run the poll of those who were elected? What was your reason? And these, we're going to show you a poll, some of the most common ones. You may have other ones as well, but I'd just like to see. Can you run that poll, Toby? Or maybe not. Sam, is that something you can do? Oh, there we go. So for all of you who were the ones who were reluctant, not the ones who were hot to try to ask, but the ones who were like, I really hope I don't have to ask. Okay, so so here's the thing. The reason why these options are up here is almost everybody feels this way. We as development, if you're a development person or a nonprofit person, you might get to choose how you want to ask or in what situations you get to do research beforehand and everything. But what I found is the flip side of why you don't want to ask is you're asking strength. So for example, if you dread it because you're afraid they'd say no, then probably you're geared to success. You don't like to fail. So someone who's geared to success can do a lot of the steps beforehand, which we'll talk about later, so that by the time they get to ask, they're like, 98% sure that it's going to be a yes of some kind. Maybe not the amount you want, but that success is something to work with in your board. Or they'll think I only want them for money. People who have this fear are usually have great social skills. So use them. Use their social skills as, engaging and cultivating and how they can help people screen, they can sense what people are going to be interested in, the people that aren't. You don't want to spend a lot of time with people who are going to say no or be uncomfortable about it, but others you can. I don't know what to say. People who have this fear are very often great data processors. So they're the ones that are often very good doing corporate or foundation asks. They're, even if it's an individual, they want to have all the, they want the charts and the graphs and the budget and the plan and everything, so that because if they know what it is they're saying, then they're going to be much more confident about asking. I don't know if they have the money. These people sometimes are really good researchers. They want to know that information. So give them all the research that shows you how this particular donor not only does have the money to give this, but has given more to other similar organizations, because then they'll get all charged up and like, well, why couldn't it? And the person who, one person said other. Can I just ask you to chat what your other was? If you can. Okay, maybe we'll circle back to this. So anyway, that's the yabbas, that's the hesitation. So just the main point is the things that were your hesitations, or like that might be your board's hesitations, are also their strengths. And I'm going to show you how to play to their strengths. First of all, I want to provide a framework. So the usual approach, as we know, this is like all of fundraising distilled down into 5 steps, is we research, and then we cultivate them, we invite them to parties or whatever, and then we ask them, then we thank them, then hopefully we engage them deeper in some way. We don't just go thank, ask, thank, ask, thank, ask. And maybe we go through the research part again, okay? This is what too often happens. It's like, here's 5 board members, here's a list of people, go ask them. Everybody has to ask 5 people. So we skip some of those stages. I'd like you to think about turning it upside down. If all you do is thank the donors you already have, if that's all you have your board members do, then you will increase your donor retention, which is a really big problem. The average nonprofit organization in the United States, at least, loses 55% of its donors each year. So we're hemorrhaging donors. No wonder everybody's always scrambling for new donors. But almost 20% of them said that they didn't feel acknowledged or thanked for their last gift. So this doesn't mean that they didn't get like a nice letter from the executive director or whatever, but maybe the person that asked them didn't thank them, or they got, a formal letter, but they didn't feel like anybody knew or cared about it. The next reason why they stopped giving is because nobody asked them. So certainly we could fix that. Not told how the funds were used. One of the things we often try to do with personalized thanking is say, not only thank you so much, this is what was made possible. This is what you're able to do. And that also ties to the dissatisfaction. Sometimes they're dissatisfied with their gift, the use of their gift, because they don't know what it was. Sometimes they're just cranky, but that's a big chunk. So we start with thanking. So from here, I'm going to give you one little story that illustrates how you can work each of these steps with your board members. So remember, the 5 steps are thinking, engaging, research, cultivating, and asking. So the first story I called The Lady Who Talks to Plants, because this is an example of, I was working with a board of an arboretum, and they were, they were trying to raise more than $3 million for a capital campaign, and everybody on the board had approved it, but nobody wanted to be on the development committee. So that was kind of a problem. So I said, let's just start with thinking. And it was like in April, but most of the gifts had come in December, but that's fine. Like, it's good for them to know that you're thinking of them and still thanking them 6 months later. So we did the usual thing where you hand out, lists of names, the people that have given, and, board members pick them. And then there's one lady, Sophia, who didn't really know anybody. So we gave her some of the people that no one knew. And one of them was a guy named Dan, who'd given, like, I think it was like $100. And and the other thing I do is I get board members to use sensory language. So I walk them through, like, imagine you're in the place you love most in the Arboretum. So she did this wonderful note to him, say, thank you so much for your $100. It helped us to have a place to store our things. This morning I was walking through the lilac collection, and this is what it smelled like, and I could see the petals, and da-da-da-da. Sent out the thank you note to somebody she never met and doesn't know. So fast forward to September, when they did the big plant sale, which is one of their biggest fundraisers. And this is not like your church plant sale or my church plant sale. Anyway, it was like they make more than $100,000 on this plant sale. And I had the board members lined up at the check-in table, just like you might. And but even to the people they didn't know. So when Dan came up, it was like, oh, Sophia, this is Dan. Dan, this is Sophia. She's a board member. She, was thanking you for your gift, because I had that all on the printout. And he said, oh, are you the lilac lady? And she said, oh, are you the $100 donor? Thank you so much. And then she said, is there anything I can help you with? So this is a really shy woman. And he said, well, actually, I just bought a 3-acre property. I'm not in the area, and I'm not from here, and I don't really know what to do. And she was like, oh. So she, spent like more than 20 minutes walking him through all the things on offer and talking about his soil and the sunlight and blah, 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 blah. And one clue that he might have more capacity was that he walked out with $15,000 worth of plants. So, and she never asked. All she did was share his expertise. So fast forward one more month, the fall appeal is going out. We ask, all the people who are assigned solicitors to or thankers to put a little note on, the letters, the kind of thing you guys probably do. And so when Sophia did it to Dan, she was like, don't forget to put your bulbs in here and blah, blah. And she gave him a whole bunch of instructions all the way down. So clearly she really remembered and cared about him. And we got a gift of $1,500 in response. And she never asked. All she did was thank and put a note and engage somebody. So my point is that having assigned thankers is a really easy way to increase your gift. And if all they do is focus on the donors you already have, you're getting ahead of the game. The next step is to engage. And a lot of people, I just said, we have a welcome table, we have check-in lists and everything. But if people are coming to an experience, they, what they feel strongest is when they're leaving. And so I got this lesson from my rector, and I was, of course, we're development people, we get put on the stewardship committee. And I said, oh, look, there's all these people that are members, but they're not tithing, or they're not contributing. And he said, oh, Val, those are the ones that don't come to church. If I focus on them, I'll have a church full of them. Meaning focusing on the people that weren't donors, then he'd have an empty church. But what I did observe about him was every Sunday, week after week, year after year, he stood at the exit and had a few words with each church member, like, how's your son doing, blah, blah, blah. They would compliment him on his, preaching or whatever. So he was engaging them over and over and over again. And so what I would suggest as an action step to you is, if you can have board members, you can have them be farewellers, not just the greeters, but the farewellers. So on the way back, if they go, what did you think of the lecture? Or do you know we have another one on geology coming up? Or what do you think of the play? Oh, this actress is going to be in another production soon. Like, just getting that information, not just for them to know, although sometimes it'd be like, oh, you want to volunteer with this? Let me get your business card. But just having people stationed as farewellers can help you to engage your donors more deeply, and certainly the people that come to things. So this is, sorry, I just want to, so this is, I don't know, I mean, few of us have had the opportunity to travel lately, but my husband and I would travel cheap, not very much money, but we like to travel a lot. So we were in the middle of, the perfect middle of the vacation, when you've had enough time to, decompress, but before you start worrying about all the tasks you have to do when you get up to. So we were at that perfect moment, and we were in this Caribbean island, and there was like a seafood shack, like that we had a fabulous dinner, like just in the middle of nowhere. So we're walking away from this dinner, and we see the shack glowing behind us in the back, and we go down to the sand, and there's a little pier, and you know how the wood gets really worn and smooth, and it was warm still from the sun. And so we just lay on our backs and looked up and looked at the stars. And I said something profound like, wow. And then I said, wouldn't you just, like, I want to dive into the stars and go swimming there. How do you feel? And my husband, Don, said, I'm terrified that I will get sucked into the black abyss of space, and I'm hanging on as hard as I can. So my point is, some people are pessimists and some people are optimists. We had the same experience. One thing that you can do, you might have some board members who don't really want to ask, but they're really good researchers. Like, the people that are information wonks, like they read the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, your local newspaper, the Business Journal, bunch of online zines. So they always are if they're looking for names all the time. And like I said, you want the optimistic person, not necessarily the pessimistic person. But if they're looking for names all the time, like I had somebody do this, and he was reading a bio about somebody who was head of a major credit card company. I think it was MBNA or something. Anyway, and so I was working at a zoo, and he sent me a lead. He said, do you know that this guy is the CEO, wherever he goes all over the world, he always stops and checks out the local zoo. So I was like, ding. So we invited him to the zoo, we got a behind the scenes tour, etc. So if you have an optimistic board member who's really good at research, and all they do is send you 5 or 6 or 10 leads a month, then you're getting a lot more out of them than if they're not doing anything at all, right? So this is called good casting in theater. We're taking people's talents and we're matching them to what they're really good at. So that's step 3. Step 4, okay, so this was, I was working at the Philadelphia Zoo. This is a true story. And I was I was in charge of corporate foundation government relations. And, so I, put together an agenda and, lists of people they could look at that they should be soliciting. These nice guys would come. They were all guys at that point in time, it's a long time ago. And they'd sit in the conference room, they'd go through names, they'd see who they were going to ask, and then they'd go away. And a month later, they'd come back and the same thing all over again. And a lot of them never asked. So I was like, this is not really productive. And I had a wonderful, wonderful committee chair. And so I talked to him and said, I have an idea. And he said, go for it. So the next time they all came in, they all had the little folders on their table with their name on them. I said, excuse me a minute. I went out, and you should know before I tell you the next part that I grew up with 5 brothers in Maine with tons of animals. I'm really comfortable with animals. And I was the only executive who took the animal handling class at the zoo. Anyway, so I walked back in with a 6-foot ball python wrapped around me. And the first thing I learned was that some people are afraid of snakes, which never occurred to me. So these big guys, like half of them were like under the table and in the corner and stuff. I was like, oh no, I didn't even anticipate that. But when they calmed down, I got them to come out and I showed them how they could pet the snake's head, with 2 fingers, how it was dry, not scaly, how they lived actually in the savannah, not like the jungles of the Amazon, how they were highly endangered because of python skin souvenir trade, and also, you know, endangered species like illegal trading, because some people just want a cool animal of their own, even if they're not taking care of them. So after about 5 minutes of that, you know, everybody, I put away the snake. And this was in the education. I mean, this was not, I used a ball python, not the really endangered snakes, but it made the point. So no snakes were hurt in the making of this little episode. So we went through the names and stuff. And what I said was, you've had dollar goals all along. I want you to have experience goals. I want you to have some people get a chance to have the behind the scenes experience of the zoo. So go out and see if you can, you know, get some people just to come. Your goal is to get people to experience it, not just the dollar goal. So they did. I guarantee you a lot of people talked about their experience that night, that weekend, you know, a month later, 5 years later, I was at one of those huge Marriott hotel rooms in downtown Philadelphia, and this guy from across the room said, "Hey, snake lady." It's like, oh, that's good. He remembered his experience. So what they did was they did bring people around. It was interesting because even the guys who were particularly scared of the snake, the first thing they did was they'd take their guests to the reptile house and say, that's the one that I, you know, this happened and I had it and blah, blah, blah. So they had a story to tell. They had their own experience to share. And, you know, a lot of people are going to self-select. If they're not interested in animals or conservation or whatever, they're just not going to come. But the people who did come, then, you know, I would go along with and listen, and they, you know, like they hated snakes, but they were really interested in the lion cubs, or they always loved polar bears or whatever. So we could, you know, follow up on their interests. And a lot of those guys got sponsorships and corporate gifts on the spot without asking. And for the ones who didn't, at least they had the experience and they could follow up on that and say, how was, you know, did you like it? Da, da, da. Do you think you want to be involved? So I would just encourage you as an action step to, you know, give your volunteers experiential goals. Get them to get other people to have experiences. And you don't have to walk around with snakes, but, you know, having something memorable kind of helps. Okay, so this is a chart I like to use because a lot of times it's like everybody's got to, you know, invite people to this gala or this event or whatever. Well, sometimes the board members you're asking to do that don't like galas. The only reason why they're going is because they're on the board, and they might buy a table just because they don't want to have to ask anybody else to buy tickets. So what I would suggest is have them pick an event that they really like. You know, so maybe somebody is like, one of my board members is a geek about mapping. He just loves maps, antique maps, current maps, all kinds of maps. And so there was an exhibit that this museum was doing about mapping in colonial era or whatever. So he put that as one of the favorite things he wanted to do. And then he tried to think of 3 other people that he thought would be particularly interested in that and why. And the same thing. So you can do this whatever you are, you know, if it's like a dance performance that some young kids have been trained to or whatever, but by having the volunteer pick 1 or 2 or 3 events that they really want to go to, they're just going to be more enthusiastic. And I would suggest, especially for cultivation, that they be events that you have that don't cost anything or cost a minimal amount, or, you know, that you would be willing to cover the cost or the volunteer would. So anyway, this is just hard to think about. So the name of the story is Don't Put Your Toddler on a Harley Davidson. So I love this picture. I just think it's really crazy. Although one of my friends who just had kids go, you're not really asking people to do that, are you? I'm like, no. So one of my rules with board members is they have to ask 3 donors before they ask 1 non-donor. So 3 people that, you know, they might not give the amount that you want them, but they give every year without question, no question, because they'll build success upon success upon success. I'm going to show you. So this occurred at a theater that I was working for. And the lady's name was Mrs. DeGrace. She was very well respected in the community, big philanthropist. She just said when she came on the board, like, Val, I'll do anything for you, but just please don't make me ask anybody for money. So I said, okay. And there's plenty of other work for her to do. The time came when we were in a real fiscal crunch. We saw it coming a couple months out. there was one person who could definitely make a major gift and solve the problem, but she was the only one who knew that person. So I had a talk with her and she agreed. And I said, but you're not going to ask that person now, the big donor. You're going to ask a couple of smaller ones first. So she said, okay. So we set her up to talk to this guy, let's call him Tony, who gave, let's say $2,500 a year. So, so she prepped with me like for an hour in advance, and she was so scared she had to have her brother drive her to the appointment. So it was really kind of sad, but she was really, loyal, and she was going to do her best. So as soon as she walked out the door, I got on the phone with Tony. I said, Tony, Mrs. DeGrace is going to come and ask you for a gift. And he was like, yeah, I know, you set it up. I'm like, so I would like you to give $3,000. And he was like, I always give 2,500. You know that, blah, blah, blah. And I said, but I just spent an hour prepping and she's really scared. He was like, why would she be scared of me? And then he said, so what did you tell her to say? And I said, well, I told her to say this and this and this, and then to ask you this, and you might say this. And he said, yeah, what else did you tell her to say? So I said, well, then the conversation might go here and she could talk about this and how there's this great director. And he's like, well, he goes, yeah. At that point, I could tell her how much the theater benefited my son and how it helped him to be more. And I was like, yeah, that's a great idea. So by the time I got off the phone, we were conspiring to help her to ask, the donor was conspiring to help the ask be made. So the time comes, I didn't think it would take more than 45 minutes, and she was supposed to call me when she was done and tell me how it went. It was 45 minutes, an hour and 15 minutes. I was like, oh my gosh, I said this poor lamb out to ask, and she's traumatized. And like an hour and 45 minutes, she just showed up in my office. And I said, how did it go? And she said, I got a gift. I was like, great. I said, did you get $2,000? Because if you got $2,000, that would be great. And she said, mm-hmm. And I said, did you get $2,500? And she said, mm-hmm. I said, did you get more than $2,500? And she said, mm-hmm. I said, how much more? And she said, Val, I got $5,000. It turns out I'm a great fundraiser. So anyway, needless to say, we set her up for a couple more like slam dunk, easy ads. By the time she got to the difficult one, she was so convinced that she was a great fundraiser. And guess what? She was. But she needed that practice. She needed success to build on success. So I would just ask you, like, don't send your, a lot of times they're like, oh, you don't have to ask them. We already have these donors. Go out and ask the people that nobody knows or they don't know anything about us. You don't want that, because that's like, you're setting them up for failure, and then they're never going to want to ask for money again. So my advice is to start them with the easy ones, like guaranteed, slam dunk. And I know you can't call every donor before somebody comes out, but it really works, and it's kind as well. So I really like, it's a true story. So I'm just keeping an eye on the time. So the next thing I want to talk to you about is something I sort of implied with casting, which is called strengths-based asking. So we want any board member or staff member, by the way, to ask in the ways that they're best at. So why do we do that? Well, first of all, strengths-based asking is like any training that you do with board members. Strengths-based training is 12 times more effective, according to Gallup polls. So, focusing on the things that people do wrong over and over again does not make them better. Building on their strengths over and over again does make them better. They tend to like it more. Like one of the things you guys said was you didn't want to get a no. Well, you don't want to get a no, but the more you practice and you get good at something you're really good at, you'll get more yeses, okay? So anyway, so how do we figure out what that is? There's lots of corporate personality tests, there's the Big Five, there's Strength Finder, blah, blah, blah. So I chose to build these asking personalities based on Myers-Briggs, which is, it's millions and millions of people have taken. I'm not saying it's better than others. I will tell you that with more than 30 years experience, I have found introverted people ask differently from extroverted people, and analytical people ask differently from, emotionally sensitive, tender hearted people. Not that they're in conflict, but so anyway, so the Myers-Briggs test, if you ever take it, and I have some free versions, links that you can do online if you want. So extroversion and introversion. Introverts aren't necessarily not social. It's just where you get your energy from. Same, thing with the sensing and tuning continuum, the thinking feeling continuum. And by the way, just because you're more like you could be like I'm an extreme extrovert, but I'm very close to the thinking feeling border, so it's a continuum. And then the judging, perceiving, this is not judgy, this is just how you deal with the world. Like, do you make those decisions like based on what you have, or are you always looking for one more piece of information or one more experience? Okay, so this is the Myers-Briggs, and I'm going to use the example of me and my big brother Chris. So Chris is the agronomist for the state of Maine, was the agronomist for the state of Maine his whole career. That means he goes around talking to farmers in rural Maine. And if you've ever heard any jokes about Maine, it's like, hey, yep, nope. They're not great conversationalists. So Chris is introverted and I'm a little more extroverted. He is an ISTJ and I'm an ENTJ. So one of the things, I'm going to walk you through, and this is a very short, little chart. So it's summarizing. And any of you who send me take your Myers-Briggs, send it to me. I'll give you a 2-page detail, like who you should ask, how you should ask, where you should ask, and do it for your board members too if you want. But anyway, this is the concept. So Chris, in the upper left-hand corner, who he should ask is quiet donors. He hates braggarts, and he's not going to do about them. How he should ask, he needs to ask on site. So bring them to the watershed, the wetlands area that he's working on building, a walkway on, and then he can talk about it a lot. But he doesn't necessarily do his best when he's like in somebody's corporate office, okay? And what he's best at asking for is his why is logical needs. Like, it's like, we need this many feet of board to do this, and the water's going up or down this much. That's like, he wants to ask for things that are like, then when this is done, we'll have it. Other people might be better with visionary things. So as an ENTJ, I like to ask the decision makers. So not the people who can say no, but like the top person who's going to make the decision. I don't, other than the one time when I got ill from overwork, I've never missed a goal, never missed a fundraising goal. So ENTJs, if you're working with some on your board, are great with challenge grants, like challenge them because they're very competitive. And then the why of the ask is I might like to ask for a lead gift, like the cornerstone gift that's going to dictate the whole capital campaign or something. And a lot of ENTJs are good at chairing committees because that's their nickname is the executive. So you can see there's a whole bunch of different ones. If you know you're asking personality, I'll send this separately, or your Myers-Briggs. Okay, so that's the who, how, why. So all of us have strengths and weaknesses, as I said before. So Chris is careful, honest, trustworthy. Like if you met my brother in 5 minutes, you would trust your child with them. I mean, very trustworthy. His weakness is that he might prep and get more and more data, but never get around to asking. The ENTJ strengths, and sometimes they can be compelling speakers. You guys will be the judge of that for me, but they can intimidate. Like sometimes if they're talking to a shy donor, they're so excited or so strong, they'll just talk over them and try and persuade them and not pick up on some little things and not listen well. So learning to keep my mouth shut was one of the biggest lessons I ever had in fundraising. And it was hard, and I still struggle with it because I'm half French Canadian. But so everybody's got their strengths and weaknesses. So you want to play to the strengths, and if you can, work around the weaknesses. So also I found each person is going to have a preferred step. So Chris, actually, the ISTJs are good at engaging in their own way, bringing them out there, and also thanking. And he's going to be very specific with his thanks. Thank you so much for your $3,000 gift last February. We used it to this and this, and you can see it in action on this and this. And he's good at engaging, and he's good at thinking in his own way. ENTJs, if you have them on your board, are usually good at askers. They're also usually very good at research. I would just suggest if you have anybody doing prospect research, don't let them go down the rabbit hole. Like tell them, we will do the Wealth Engine or iWave or whatever research. We'll pull their LinkedIn bios. What we want you to do is use your social connections to find out what you can find out about this person, if they'd be interested or not, why. the information that we can't get online, because otherwise, you know, ENTJs love research, so they could like spend 5 hours and never getting around to ask anybody. So you don't want them to go there. Okay, so let's take a minute and put it together. So if Chris was on your board, he's an ISTJ. You would set him up to ask quiet donors. Give him an opportunity to ask on site as much as possible, especially coming out of COVID. You want him to ask for logical needs, not pie in the sky, visionary kind of stuff. You know what his strengths are, his weaknesses, and his steps that he would be best at, what you want to assign him for. And and then my question would be, how would you help Chris? I don't know if anybody has any suggestions, or we can go over this at the end. I will tell you what I did was I scheduled regular times. Once a month, he had a time when he was doing donors. We would invite people to come to talk to this expert. So they were fed to him, and I kept an eye on the personalities of the people. So you guys can figure out different things that you could help a Chris on your board with, but that's one suggestion. I'm sure you can come up with other great ones. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about a little bit is preparing for yes, because a lot of people are ready for no, but they're not ready for yes. So first of all, I want to talk about SMART goal setting. And if, you know, you guys probably have, you know, heard about SMART goals. It's got to be specific, measurable, achievable, relevant. So I just want to say, here's a fun chart you can use. I did it with a group that was they wanted their board to get sponsorship for a big event they had every year. And so, you know, they said each board member filled this out for themselves. So it wasn't somebody that we were telling them, they filled out for themselves. And what I will tell you is that the board chair he went through and he's like, my goal is to get $10,000. Yes, it is, blah, 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 I will do this. So what he decided was, there was somebody who was a vendor for his big company. And he said, you know, I give him millions of dollars of business, and I've been meaning to ask him, and I've never asked him to support this cause. So, so he figured out how he was going to do it, when he was going to do it, all that kind of stuff. And he got a $10,000 sponsorship that he'd never gotten before, but he didn't have it as a specific goal before, right? He needed it to be a goal, a time-sensitive goal, and very specific. And I would say that you can do this for yourself, but you can also do, when you're doing this, so reporting back, sharing it with a supportive person is helpful. But I also would like you to consider, what obstacles might you encounter and how have you overcome them in the past? So like, have you done a diet? If you got off it, if you fell off in like 4 days, why? How have you been successful in getting on before? Have you succeeded with, and then, so again, building on the strengths, like have you been successful, so that when you might fail or get stuck or something, you have a way to get around that. And that's the same, your board needs the same kind of stuff. So, so here's the thing, we all do visualization, even if you think it's hooey, we do, and athletes use it a lot. But we visualize all the time. It's called worrying, right? So we're always thinking like, oh, I'm going to be late, and I don't have this, and I didn't prepare enough, and is the network. And so we are always, a lot of us who are worriers are thinking about all the things that are going to go wrong. So if you flip that and you imagine everything going right, everything that's possible to go right. So, you do breathe deep, imagine what it is, make it as clear as possible. And the interesting thing is that visualization really works. I mean, your body does not know the difference between something you visualize clearly and something that's actually happening. So I don't know if anyone knows this young lady named Bianca. She is the youngest woman ever to win the US Women's Open for tennis. When she was 10, she wrote herself a check for $3 million for winning the women's tennis. And every day for years and years before that, she visualized herself winning. I think she did it when she was 16 or something. So just consider it as a tool for yourself and also for your board. So I just want to go, so what have we covered? We talked about why people hate fundraising and that there are really good reasons, and we should listen to them and then address them, and then realize the opposite of our fear is probably our strength. The 5 steps of asking, and I will tell you, I did this training with a group once, and a business development guy for a company came up to me and goes, "Oh, I get it." He said, "This is just like the sales cycle, like your best customers are your current customers and blah, 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 blah. but nobody ever gave the board a framework. They didn't know what was supposed to happen before and what was happening afterwards. Once he got that, he started, really clicking with his fundraising, but he needed to understand the framework. So that's why I think it's good to share the steps of asking, the fundraising process. Knowing their asking personality, your asking personality can allow you to focus on what you're good at and them to focus on what they're good at and what maybe not so good at and not going to do and going to hate you for making them do. And then finally, how to show up ready for yes, rather than show up ready for no. So that's pretty much what I have. I did want to just mention before we start the question and answer that if you you can pay for the official Myers-Briggs, but there's some free online ones you can get, and I have various resources for me, but that's it. Does anybody have any questions? And I'm going to ask Sam to scroll through and hopefully read and whatever.
Absolutely, yes. So we had a couple comments that I wanted to loop back to as well. The first was from back to the poll. So we actually had the other.
So yeah, good.
She read that out. So her reasoning was not wanting them to feel badly if they couldn't or didn't want to give. So I just thought you should know that.
Exactly. So that's another social sensitive person. And so you would definitely want to do, and I said do it right after. So obviously you weren't, it's not like you were prepping for this ask beforehand, but to make sure that they did have the capacity, because the secret of my success really, I've raised almost $200 million now, and I think I've gotten less than 10 no's. Because why would you focus on people that are going to say no? Focus on people who are going to be able to say yes. So your instinct is 100% right. And you should do some research to figure out if it's even possible, because you don't want to put your friend in a socially awkward position. And by the way, if any of you guys find yourself in that position, somebody says, well, actually, I got furloughed and then I got laid off because of COVID and my company closed, and I'd love to help you, but I can't. It's, especially if it's in person, the instinct is to sort of wrap up and it's oh, I'm really sorry, it's really awkward, bye, and leave or something. But what you want to do is say, I'm really sorry, if there's anything we can do to help or I can do to help, let me know. We still really appreciate all your support. Would you be interested in being a social media ambassador? Or, whatever it is that they might be able to do. And they can always say no, but the point is you always have to care more about the individual. It's more about the donor than it is about the transaction. And if you leave because you're uncomfortable and feel awful because you said that what you're saying is, oh, I only cared about you because of the gift, which is not what you meant to say at all, right? So I don't know if I answered that question.
I think you answered that splendidly. I think it all comes down to communication. So a couple of people have been asking, yes, you will receive the recording and the slide deck, but also Valerie, do you mind popping it back to the personality test slide again? I had a few people ask to see that.
Yep. So if you Google 16 personalities, that will come up. And then Truity, Truity, and I'm not recommending these as better words, and they're free. So, get what you pay for, but Psych Central also has a good one, which I didn't list here because I don't want to list too many. But if you've ever had them done before, it might vary a little over time if you're using, one of these knockoff ones, but close enough. And I have to say, if you do this and I send you the Ask Personality and you say, oh, this isn't me at all, I would just ask you to ask your partner if you have one. Because I've had people trained and they say, oh, this isn't me at all. And I say, can you just ask your wife about that? And they comes back and goes, well, actually, she says it's exactly. So, but if it's not, then just, the point is, do it, send me, a couple of Myers-Briggs, if you come up with ENTJ and ENFJ or whatever, send both of them, I'll send you both of them. And then just pick the things that are helpful and ignore the rest. You're the expert on you. I'm not saying this is perfect. So anyway, any other questions?
Yes, I have one come in from Mark. What are the 4 reasons donors stop giving?
Okay. You want me to go back to the slide for why they stop giving? Okay. Not acknowledged for their last gift. And this was, by the way, it was a very specific study. I had kind of a hard time finding what I wanted. So it's for people who had given $2,500 or more to, and I worked in to an arts group 2 years before and had not renewed their gift. And then they were surveyed. So the number one reason was, because they hadn't been thanked. And by the way, 55% does not necessarily add up to these other ones, because there were two different studies. But so one is just the percentage, and you can get this from Chronicle and Giving USA and stuff. But the other is a separate study that said, so not acknowledged or thanked. They didn't feel like they were acknowledged or thanked, not asked again, not told how their funds were used, in dissatisfaction with use of the gift. So I would say communication is really it all the way along. But if you do nothing else, really thanking them well makes a difference.
On the communication thread, we've actually got a question. Is it disrespectful to ask my board to take the personality test? I'd love to get to know their personalities better, but do not want to come across as rude or invasive.
Yeah. So what's really, really fun is I have mapped every board I work with, I map their personalities. So in training, I'll say, I need to tailor their training. Like, what I would just say is, like, there's this way that I can support you better. And if you say you may end up not having to ask, everybody's going to want to take it, honestly, like, oh, maybe I'll be a thanker. Like, everybody's happy to be on the thanking part of the development committee. So you can ask, and what I would do is just have a couple of plants in the audience who said, oh yeah, I took it and this is really, interesting, or I learned this, or I never thought, blah, blah, blah. And then ask the rest. And then, but shockingly, if you map them, like I take the Myers-Briggs grade, and I sort of say, like, there's, 6, like the Science Museum board, like all the analytical, parts, and the University of Spiritual Healing and Sufism, which is one of my favorite clients, very high on the feeling side, and the visionary side, which is not surprising. So, but it is good because it helps you, and I'll just use this very specific example, it helps you also pair people. So most of the time, if you're going on a big ask, it's going to be a staff member and a board member, but sometimes you have 2 board members that know a donor. And I like having an introvert and an extrovert, or an intuitive and an analytical, because, like, I sent 2 people out like that once, and it was just, like, a big gift varies on the size of the organization I'm working with, but it was like $1,000 gift they were asking for. And they were asking for like 5,000, I forget. Anyway, so they came back, and the extrovert said, guess what? We got $3,000. And the introvert said, no. He said he would pledge $1,000 this year and consider renewing for 2 more years. So you can see how that's, like, they're hearing different things and they're bringing different information back to you. So whether you do it like with staff or an individual, if you can, it's good to have more than one. And then also, obviously, you want more relationship carriers. So if that board member is the only one who knows a major donor, it's not so good. But if the executive director or a development person goes with them, then you're sharing the relationship carrying, and also they can write you follow-up emails and stuff like that. So I don't know if I answered the question.
You provided me a great segue into Harold's question, though.
Okay,
Should you ask
I
your board
I did that on purpose.
Thank you. You're making my job very easy.
Yeah.
Should you ask your board to contribute a specific amount yearly?
So it varies, and also it varies why they're on the board. So like, some people, you might have a young person or constituents who are being served who are not in the same financial capacity. Most people like to have a minimum, and what I would do is I wouldn't make it a surprise. Like, that should be part of the discussion up front, not just like, oh, you're my friend, you're so smart, you're wonderful, you'll be great. And they get on, they're like, whoa, I didn't know I was supposed to give $5,000. Like, that should be part of the initial conversation. The other thing is, you don't have to worry about it if you ask donors to be board members, right? So, like, if you have a minimum level of $1,000 or whatever it is, and you're just looking at people who are at that level, and if you're asking them and they're not stepping up to that level, then they may not be that interested in you, or they may not have capacity, you just don't know what's going on. So the easiest way to deal with that issue is, yes, you're going to have an expectation. You can say if it's a stretch gift or whatever, and depending on why people are on your board, like you have a legislator or something, it might be different. But the safest thing to do is to ask donors to be on your board.
Thanks so much, Valerie. I think we have time for one more question, so we'll sneak this one in from Kim. Any thoughts on cultivate activities for boards when we are not having too many in-person events?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, obviously, I mean, I work with arts, culture, and environmental organizations. So, we've been doing a lot of social media. I mean, honestly, the Philadelphia Boys and Girls Choir, it's like a lot of kids singing out loud together. So that's been pretty hard. But they've been, one of the things they've done is they've done edited recording things. And so they'll get a little segment to share with them and ask them for feedback or tell them why they think it's interesting, or do you like Mozart or whatever. So there's the virtual things. I'm sure you guys all do virtual events and all that kind of stuff. I've been amazed at how many people are willing to meet outdoors, and at least we're in Philadelphia, August stinks, but the fall is really nice weather. I mean, it's sticky, yucky, horrible. Now that may not work in the Pacific Northwest if it's on fire and you don't want your donors breathing smoke all the time. But if you do have the option, the other thing, remember, is psychologically, and I do this like at work and with my staff and everything, your thinking is broader and bigger and more creative when you have a landscape in front of you or an open space in front of you than when you're looking at like an office wall or something like that. So getting donors outside or in a space where they can view, even if it's just sitting outside on a terrace together and having a glass of wine and talking with, I mean, they never want to talk to the development person, but there's this really cool actor that came out and sat on my stone deck and had, cocktails and wine with, a couple of donors and board members. So you can do intimate things that are outside. So I mean, I know it, like if you're a battered women's shelter, there's other solutions and stuff like that, but I don't know if that helps. But my big tip is whatever kind of organization you are, if you can get people outside, they tend to think in a more open and visionary way. I hope that helps.
That's a great